Hey everyone. I've been playing with Stable Diffusion for about a week now actually, and I'm having a great time, and I wanted to make a video just to show people how easy it is to get up and running with this. Stable Diffusion is a generative AI art tool, and the advantage is that it can be installed locally on your own system rather than having to use it in a browser or online or something. And that gives you some flexibility, and it gives you some control over the environment, the plugins, and all of the results that you might get. And you know, you can fine tune it to your own preferences. Is we should talk really quickly about the prerequisites. So what I have here, what you're looking at, is a virtual machine that I installed that's a completely clean install of Windows with a couple of other apps like Notepad++ and Firefox and things. But I wanted to start with as vanilla of a system as possible to show sort of the average user just how easy it is to install this. And for a non-technical person, I think setting something like this up can be rather intimidating. You need things like Python and Git, and it's a command line based tool and things, and that could be intimidating for some people if they're not very technical. But really, if you can install any piece of software, you can install this too and get rolling. And that's really the perspective, and the goal of this video is to show kind of a you know average user that's not a power user or a highly technical user how to get started with this rather sophisticated, rather highly technical tool, so that you can get in here and start making art and start having fun. And once you get the foundation built, it will be a huge learning opportunity. But of course, you've got to get it up and running first, and that's a potentially an intimidating barrier for a lot of people. So that's the perspective of this video. If that's you, then welcome, and we're going to walk through just how easy this is to get installed. Now, one of the things we need to talk about is hardware. You need a reasonably modern, fairly potent system to run this. Optimally, you will have an NVIDIA card, graphics card that is powerful enough, that has 8 gig of RAM, as they say here. There are also other options and builds and things to run this with either an AMD card or with only a CPU based rendering. All of those things have their own caveats and things that you need to work with. But if your hardware is NVIDIA based and it's reasonably modern and performing, you should be able to get by with getting this installed. I'm going to walk through the install on this machine, but I can't actually run it because, like I was describing, this is a virtual machine. This isn't actually a computer. This is a VM. And so I don't have any 3D accelerated hardware that can actually run this. So what I'll do is I'll walk through the installation in this environment, and then I'll switch over to my actual machine that already has this up and running, and then you can see how you can see what the tool actually looks like. But this isn't meant to be an in-depth how to use Stable Diffusion, and there's plenty of great videos on that, and I might make a intro of that myself. But this is more about the installation. It's really only 3 pretty straightforward steps. It's not very difficult. Now, Stable Diffusion at its core, the original branch or distribution of it, is a command line tool. Now, there are some fantastic folks that have created a graphical user interface, GUI, for us that makes managing the tool and learning the tool a lot better. It has tooltips. You can experiment very easily and sort of see the effects of that. And so that's what I'm going to recommend that we install, and that's what I'm going to be installing in this video. So I've been talking a lot about just how easy it is, but I haven't started yet. So let's get started. I think if you're watching this, what you're really looking for is the essential steps, and that's what I'm going to show you. So let's jump right in. Okay, you need three things. You need Python, you need Git, and you need Stable Diffusion. Now, Stable Diffusion has several branches and builds that you can use. We're going to use a specific one that has the web and graphical interface built into it. And you'll see how awesome that works out. So, all right, we'll get rid of this. We know what Stable Diffusion is. What you need is something called Python. That's a code runtime environment. We're going to just type Python download in the search field of our browser. You want to make sure you're getting your software from reliable sources. This is python.org, the legitimate source of Python. I'm going to go here and I'm just going to go to downloads for Windows. Now, I recommend we grab the stable release. You can grab the latest release. That's your own prerogative. I'm going to go with stable because that's what I did on my other system and it worked fine. So we're going to do that. We want the Windows 64-bit installer. And that's coming down. That's only about 27 meg. We'll also want to grab Git. Git is a software manager for software that's available on GitHub and other sources. But we're going to need this to manage our software, to manage our installation of Stable Diffusion. So you want to make sure you're, again, let me just go back real quick, and same thing, search engine of your choice, Git download or Git download for Windows. Make sure you're getting it from git-scm. Okay, for Windows, I'm just going to grab the latest 64-bit version here. It's the most recent maintained build, which is fine. Once we have those two things, Python and Git. Now, just add a little color here. You have a lot of options with Python. A lot of people are using Anaconda or Miniconda or something else. If you have other software that's Python dependent, you're starting to get into advanced user or power user territory. This is a specific version of Python. You may have other software that's Python dependent. I think the average user is not likely to have that kind of requirement, which is why I went with regular Python. So let's jump over and get these two prerequisites installed. And once we do that, let's start with Python. And I'm just gonna, you want to make sure you click this. Add Python executable to your path. That's not something you're going to need immediately, but in the future, as you start learning more and you get more advanced, you may need to run Python from the command line. So save yourself some headache down the line and just check this checkbox. Most people can just click install now. I like to see what's happening when I install a piece of software, so I'll choose the custom install steps. I'm just going to leave this as is because it's fine, but it's just nice to see all the different things that are being installed. One thing I would advocate for if you're going to click on advanced is just install it for all users. That means if you have multiple people that have a login to this system, they will all be able to use Python. Otherwise, it's going to install it only for the person who's logged in right now. So, install for all users, and let's let it rip. So that was pretty straightforward. And I even went with the more advanced version of the steps, I guess, for installing Python. So that's pretty easy. We'll let this go. This is a fairly slow virtual machine running on a fairly slow laptop, so not expecting any kind of extreme performance out of this. The purpose is really to show the installation of the software and the steps and just how straightforward it is. Once we get Python installed, we'll move on to Git and then Stable Diffusion itself. And you'll see it's really in about, I don't know, 20 minutes or so, you can probably get up and running with Stable Diffusion. Okay, that's completed, and it just says setup was successful. We're just going to close this. And now let's move on to installing Git. And we click Next. We decide where we want it to go. I'm just going to leave it default. Next. I might like to have an icon on the desktop. Why not? That's fine. It's going to add it to the start menu. That's fine with me too. Now, what kind of text editor do we want? You can just leave this alone and click Next. I happen to have Notepad++ installed, and if you want to pick, text editor or editor of your choice, go right ahead. For the purpose of this instruction, we're just going to leave it alone and click Next. We're going to let that decide and click Next. Leave this alone, but make sure you don't modify this. This is important so that third-party software can also interact with Git. This is fine. Next. This is fine. Next. This is fine. Next. This is fine. Next. And this is fine. Next. Oh, this one too. Sure. And we don't want any experimentation. It's quite enough experimenting for one day, and here we go. Okay. So that was relatively straightforward, and off it goes. Once this is completed, we're already on to the next step, which will be installing Stable Diffusion itself. Now, this is probably the, I don't know, maybe most complex part of the installation coming up. But if you can compose an email, I think we're going to be able to get through it. So hang in there with me, and I think we're going to get through this together. There we are. We do not even need to review the release notes. That's quite all right. Thank you. If you go to your Start menu, there'll be some Python information in here too. So those two pieces are done. Python installed. Git is installed. Now, the next piece we need to do is get our hands on a build or the software itself for Stable Diffusion. Now, like we were discussing, I think the easiest to learn for the average person, for myself, and I would like to think I'm fairly technical, but I'm new to this tool, and to learn the tool, the build that we're going to grab is called automatic, without any spaces, 1, 1, 1, 1, 4 ones here. And then just for to be thorough, let's type GitHub here, because I know that's where it is, and we want to make sure we're getting it from a reliable source. Automatic 1, 1, 1, 1. And there we are, from github.com. Now, the build that we're looking to get from automatic 1111 is Stable Diffusion Web UI. So let's click that. What we need is a place to put Stable Diffusion. Where do you want to put it? I have some recommendations, actually. The files that you're going to be working with related to Stable Diffusion are fairly large. You're going to want to have a good 50 gig probably of space. That's just, an estimate, but a lot of the model files are easily 3 gig on average. Between 2 and 9, it's pretty common, and you're likely to want to experiment with several of those. And the more advanced you get, you're going to be installing extensions, add-ons, other things, and a lot of the assets and things that you'll be working with are fairly large. So consider that when you're about to install Stable Diffusion. It does take a decent amount of disk space. I don't have any choice. There's only one disk here because this is a virtual machine. So I only have a C drive. If you happen to have another drive here that has a bunch of free space, by all means, please use that. You're not forced to install this anywhere. It's entirely up to you. And we're going to make that now. So let's go to wherever you want it and open that up. I'm going to put it, I'm just going to right click and say new folder. I'm going to call this Stable Diffusion. I'm not particularly creative. Here we are. Now, there are other ways you can make a new directory or folder. Make it however you see fit. Wherever you want to put it, just put it. And then go into it. The easiest way here is to go into the folder itself and just type cmd, and that's going to open a command window from where you are. The next step is we're here at Stable Diffusion Web UI, and we're going to grab, you could grab the zip, you could open this in GitHub, or you could go here and just copy this link, right? I just click this little copy button here and it says you've copied it. And now, if you're in your Stable Diffusion folder, just type git clone, and then you can either right click or Control V. I'm going to right click because that's easier for most people, and that's what it looks like. Now, what are we doing here? What's this instruction? We're telling Git to clone, or make a copy of this repository. What is this repository? It's all of this. And it's going to bring it down to our local machine as soon as I hit enter. There's an advantage to doing it this way, and you'll see that in just a minute. There it is. That took not long at all. And then if you just do dir, here's all the, oops. Well, you can see there was nothing in there. Now there's a Stable Diffusion Web UI folder. And here's all the stuff it copied down for us. That's really the most complicated part of this whole process. Now, you can just get rid of this because I'm going to show you a couple of things where you won't have to bother with the command line again. Okay, so let's go back to our Stable Diffusion folder. Now you can see here's the folder we created, Stable Diffusion, and here are all the files that Git just copied down for us. Git is going to help us manage this software. Now, before we run Stable Diffusion, we want to do one other thing, and that's this web UI user.bat. Let's right click on this and click edit. There's not much in there, but what this is telling us is this is a batch file or a script, and there's a lot of really nice automation and setup here that's going to happen auto-magically. That's a word that hasn't been around for a while. Auto-magically for us. But we do want to add a couple of command line arguments and one other thing right here. So it's highly recommended if you do not have a very powerful, if you have an older NVIDIA card, you're going to want to make sure you use the switch that says 2 dashes, no space, MEDVRAM. I think of it like mediocre VRAM. If you've got an older system, you'll want to use that, and then space, 2 more dashes, Xformers. These help with memory management and speeding up Stable Diffusion or optimizing Stable Diffusion. Now, under here, you're going to want to do one other thing, which is git pull. What does that do? Git pull is going to tell Git every time we run this script or every time we run Stable Diffusion, check to see if there's any updates here. That will keep this up to date because this application is always being contributed and instantiated, and we want to make sure we're always up to date. So by putting these couple of commands here, we're optimizing the performance, especially if you have a slower card. Now, if you have a much newer graphics card, maybe 16 gig or 24 gig, you don't need this VRAM switch here, but you probably could still use the Xformers. And then git pull is recommended anyway to keep this build up to date. And that's it. Before we close this, we just want to say save. I'm actually probably going to have to add another switch here to make the installation complete, but we'll see how that works out. But you won't have to do that. It's only because I'm running in this virtualized environment here. Okay, anyway, medvram, Xformers, git pull. You could even throw it at the top probably, but while we're here, and then save, close. One more thing while we're here and messing around with this. This is just something I think will make your own life easier. Take this, right click, drag it over to your desktop, and don't copy, don't move, because both of those things are going to make a hard time for you. You want to let go and say create shortcut. Why? Because whenever we want to launch Stable Diffusion, we're going to have to run this script. As we looked, this script says, hey, Stable Diffusion, please start up and do these things. And so rather than having to go dig this out, much like Firefox, right? Rather than having to navigate to Firefox every time and say, hey, Firefox exe in program files, Mozilla Firefox, and then double click on this, we just have a shortcut here and we double click this and you don't think anything of it. It knows where to go and it tells Firefox, please start. We're going to do that right here. And you can even right click on this and rename it. We're going to call this Stable Diffusion. And then we can even go into the properties and change the icon. If you right click it, I don't know, let's give it a cool icon while we're here. If I go all the way to the end, here's one that looks kind of graphically. This kind of looks like what Stable Diffusion Web UI looks like. Let's use one of these. I'm going to go with this one because it sort of outputs a grid. And there you have it. Here's our little makeshift Stable Diffusion icon. But then we can just double click this and off it goes. And hey, we might as well do that now. We're done. We installed Python and it's good. We installed Git and that's all set. We did the most complicated piece, which is really, it's not that quite complicated. We did have to make our own directory, and we did have to clone the repository from GitHub, and then we added a little switch that says, please keep my repository up to date. And then you're going to see this in action when we run this Stable Diffusion. So now we're really done. You can get rid of this. We're going to minimize this for now. And here we are. We're going to double click on this. Now, I won't be able to fully run this environment on this virtual machine. Why? Because this virtual machine does not meet the hardware requirements, and I can't actually run Stable Diffusion on this virtual machine. It doesn't. It just doesn't have enough power to meet the requirements. So I'm gonna run this anyway so that you can see it run off, and then I will actually show you Stable Diffusion. So when you double click on this, it starts up all of the nice scripts and automation that's going to happen. Now, this is the git pull command that we added to the startup script. It says, hey, go out and check GitHub for the repository. Make sure this repo is up to date. And if it isn't, it's going to do a bunch of steps to make it up to date. And if it is, it'll say, oh, you're already up to date. No need to update anything. So that's already making things easier for us. Now you're starting to reap the benefits of the setup that we did ahead of time. Now it's gonna, what it's doing, it's not always going to be this slow. So the first time you start up Stable Diffusion, it's going to go off. It's going to install anything it needs. It's going to grab other libraries and assets and pull all of those things down. And then so the first time you run it, it's going to be a little slow. If there's updates, any major updates or anything, it'll have a little bit of delay. But for the most part, once it's all installed and up to date, it'll open pretty much as quickly as any other application. But this initial one's going to take a little bit of time. So we'll give this a minute to do its thing, and then we'll check on the progress. This will help me illustrate the point. When you're installing Stable Diffusion, you absolutely will need to be connected to the internet and be prepared to download several gigabytes of other supporting files and information. So you can see right here, one of the first steps is downloading and installing PyTorch, and it's 2.3 gig. There'll be a few other modules and things that it will install. It also will install, at least at this point in time, version 1.5 of the model set, so that you have something to start working with. And that is, I think it's about 3 gig or so. We'll see when the install continues, but it does support the idea that you're going to need to be pulling down some fairly sizable files, and you're going to have to be connected to the internet. Once it's done and installed, actually, you don't need to be connected to the internet. If you're running this on a laptop, let's say, and once it's up and running and installed and working correctly, you'll only need to pull down updates and things. And if you want to take this, I don't know, and work on it somewhere where you don't have internet, that would be perfectly fine. It's just when you're doing the install, you need to be sort of live connected to get all of these supporting files. And actually, even when you're using the application, the first time you use certain features, if you've never used them before, some of those will also reach out, download whatever they need, and set things up automatically for you. But of course, you have to be connected to the internet. So once you've gotten past some of those things and you've used some of these features, and I'll probably do a separate walkthrough of some of that, but it's really nice that it does it automatically for you. You just have to be aware of the idea that you've got to have an internet connection for it to automate those things for you. So yeah, all right, we'll let this keep chugging along, and we'll check back in when it's done. So we're at the point in the installation where it is installing the model 1.5 pruned, and it has an extension of safe tensors, and I didn't know what any of that was, and so I'll explain it to you so that you can benefit from what I found, and I am by no means an expert. So from one beginner to another, here's what I've been able to uncover. You can see, as I was mentioning, this is more than 3 gig. It's nearly 4, 3.97 gig. And so a model, also called a model card or a checkpoint, is a data set of trained information. Okay, that's a mouthful. What it really boils down to is, in order for Stable Diffusion to take your words and turn it into a picture, it has to understand what kinds of pictures you might be asking it. People spend a substantial amount of time, actually, and effort, what's called training the model. So if you're asking for a picture of a fuzzy cat romping through a garden, and you're using a model that's trained on dystopian robots, you're not going to get what you're looking for. And so that's why there's such a huge variety of models out available online. And so we'll look at that once this installation wraps up, and I'll show you how to obtain those and where to put them so that you can use them. But that's what they are. And of course, there are some general purpose models. That's what's being pulled down right now, sort of the official general default model that's been trained on kind of a wide data set for many things. And that's a great starting point to learn and start experimenting. When you're looking to start doing something a little more specific, you'll want a model, you'll maybe want a model that's trained a little more aligned with what you're looking to create, and that's when you'll be seeking out these other models. So that's what a model is, or a checkpoint, or a model card, and I'll show you where to get those. And as I was describing before, they're all fairly sizable, 3, 4, upwards 9 gig or so. And you may, depending on what you're working on, want to switch between them. And so this automatic web UI build helps us do that pretty easily. Instead of having to rename the model file, there's actually a drop down. You just pick the model, it loads it in for you, and then you can use that in your experiments. I regularly switch between models to see which one is giving me the result that I'm looking for. And so you're likely to do the same in your experimentation. While we're on the topic of models, let's change gears for a second and talk about where to get them and how to use them. So the two most popular places to get them are Hugging Face and, I'm not sure how to pronounce this, Civit AI. I like how this is organized better because you sort of get a sense for how the model is trained, the types of images that the model is trained for. And this sort of reiterates my point that if you're going for kind of this photo look, or if you're going for more of a animated or 3D kind of look, the model will be tailored to the type of image you're trying to produce. Let's look at this one. This site is cool because not only does it give you some information, but if you see, for example, an image that someone says, hey, I made this with this model, a lot of times they'll also give you the prompts that they used, and that's really helpful too. Like, okay, I'm going for this kind of look. Maybe you're not looking for an Aston Martin, but here are the prompts, here's the model they used, here are the steps and things that they used, and the settings and the words that they used to create this image. And then you can use that as a starting point even for your own and say, oh, great, okay, this is already in line with what I was looking to produce. And then you can see what the file is. And there it is. It's 2 gig. And you can just click download. You may see something called Safe Tensor, and you may see something called Pickle Tensor. Okay, those are just 2 different formats of models. Now, as I said, from one beginner to another, the difference between the two really is Safe Tensor, as the name implies, is verified to not have any kind of rogue or malicious type of code built into it. whereas pickle tensor may. If you're getting it through one of these more legitimate sites, like here or Hugging Face, you're probably okay. They're both installed the same way, and there's no usability difference between them. So if you have an option, you might as well grab the safe tensor. If for whatever reason you find yourself in a situation where you want to use the other format, there are a few actually scanning tools you can get, and they install the same way as we installed Stable Diffusion itself. Okay, that's a whole side jag, but it's important because if you're totally new to this, you might be like, what do I pick? There's a safe tensor here. There isn't here, but there may be two different file types. What's the difference? Oh no, that's the difference. But when you can, you might as well just grab the safe tensor. There's no difference in usability or size most of the time, so you might as well just use that one. We're going to download it, and then it'll give me an opportunity to show you where these files live. All right, so our file has completed downloading. Let's see how we where we put this so that we can use it. So we have our Stable Diffusion folder where we are, Stable Diffusion Web UI, and some of the important places you'll want to know. Models, not to be confused with modules, is where we're going to want to take a look. And then there's a bunch of things here, but the place where general models go is here. And you can see the one that was downloaded for us when we installed this 1.5 pruned is already here. It put it in that spot. So we're going to want to find where we downloaded this other one about cars in our downloads directory. And here it is. And we're just gonna, I recommend either right-clicking and dragging so that you can say move and move it. These are so large, you probably don't want to keep them in two places, but that's up to you. Yes, so then once you have it here in this folder, Stable Diffusion Web UI Models, Stable Diffusion, it's kind of repetitive, but here it is. That's where these general purpose items go. The installation is done. Let's pivot and take a look at actually using this, and off we go. Okay, when your Stable Diffusion is running correctly, what you'll see is here this line that says running on local URL http://127.0.0.1:7860. And this is your local computer. And what's that telling us is visit this link in a browser and you will get the interface. So let's take a look. Let's open the browser of your choice. And I just happen to have it bookmarked here. As you see, it's 127.0.0.1:7860, or you could just type it in here if you want. And hit it. And now you've got yourself the Stable Diffusion UI. So a couple of things. This is certainly not going to be an in-depth overview of everything here, but let me give you enough to get started, because now that you've got this up and running, and you saw it was just a few straightforward steps for the most part with some waiting for downloads, let me give you the quick basics to get you started, and then you will be off to the races and learning quite a bit about all this and having some fun. So at least I hope you will. So if you start over here at this text to image, which is the default, and you just type whatever you want. And
and you just type whatever you want, whatever you're thinking of. And then come on over here. You don't even have to touch anything else really for now, and hit generate. And you'll see the command line stays open because this is really the environment. This user interface is just running on top of the command line. But here's our little picture. Boy, that sure matched exactly what I asked for. It's a rather fuzzy little Maine Coon running in a field with vivid colors. That's a great picture, actually. I might save that. And if you want to save it, you just save it here. The great thing about this tool is if you just hover over these things, it gives you some tool tips. Batch count has less of a impact on VRAM. So let's try that. And we'll hit our generate button again. Now just, oh, I already saved this pic, so that's good. I do like that one. He looks really happy. And you'll see here we'll start getting some options. Look at that. Now we've got 6 happy little friends, and they're taking around. This one has a weird artifact, so let's enlarge these and take a look. Yeah, I mean, I think that's really, really great at what we were asking for. This has so much fluff, it's flying off the side here, but oh, that's majestic. That guy looks like he's really going for it. Yep. These are great. That's a lot of fun. Okay, there you go. And now you have some options, and you can pick which one you like. Obviously, that one, the previous one had some artifacts. I kind of like this one. He's very flashy looking. But pick the one you like, the one that comes out best, and then you can sort of continue to work on that one image and refine it further, or save it, or upscale it, or clean it up. There's a lot of options, of course, here, and this is just one screen of several, so don't be overwhelmed. Take your time. This is just enough to get you started and having fun. And I hope you enjoyed this. I hope it helped you get up and running quickly. I'm having a lot of fun with it, and I hope you will too. I neglected to give you one piece of information that will be important. So we did save a couple of pictures of our friends here, and I'm going to save this one too because I like it. That's a good one. And hit save. Or if you're looking at it enlarged, you can click on the save button here. They do the same thing, and then you can close it down. But if you look really quickly in the settings and paths for saving, you'll see where all these things get saved. So my system here, it's in Stable Diffusion Web UI log images, and then here are our images. Mine look like this because I set them to look like this. It's just a time, date stamp, and the seed. But, yep, there are our friends. So, I don't want you to get all excited, make a cool picture, and then have a hard time finding it again. So, that's where those are saved. Thanks for watching.